Good afternoon, everybody. This is Sri Rajagopalan with Murano Corporation, along with Jerry Kilty from Quality Management Solutions. Welcome to our webinar titled Education Training Requirements for a Successful Supply Chain Manager Implementation. The agenda for today's talk is as follows. We're going to cover education part of an implementation, and then we're going to talk about training. And part of the education is, this is where Jerry Kilty is going to talk about APICS. What's APICS? He's going to talk about the APICS body of knowledge, and then he's going to talk about various certifications and prep courses, and we'll talk about why that's important in rolling out Supply Chain Manager, and then we'll talk about the training part. So I'll cover some of the training, and Jerry's going to cover the education. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Jerry to introduce himself and then also talk about the next few slides, and then I'll jump in from time to time. All right, Jerry, so take it away.
Thank you, Sri. Excuse me. Good afternoon, or I guess it is afternoon technically now for everybody in the East. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this webinar. Feel free to develop questions and ask me as you either think of them, or there'll be time at the end for Q&A as well. So the slide you're seeing is a split between an academy for supply chain and then a lot of training for the supply chain manager product that Sri has that focuses on the implementation and the technology. He's identified education and training as being separate issues, and I really support that concept. I've always said that education is learning why you're doing things, and training is learning how to do those things. So on the left-hand side, on the academy side, is a splash of activities that are currently available through Murano, typically on site at your facility, to get a very high-level overview of these different items, kind of categorized by people, process, and best practice. I like that categorization. It really ties with the whole idea of the combination of people, process, and technology making things happen. When you look at the educational subject matters there, I mentioned the word splash, and what I mean by that is that this is just a few of the many activities that APICS talks about in their what they refer to as a body of knowledge. So Sri, if we can go to the next slide. First of all, you're going to see all the same slides that have been presented in previous webinars over the last couple of weeks, 2 to 3 weeks worth. So this is should be a familiar slide to you about inventory and the idea of having a chart like this that goes from not having inventory to having too much inventory.
And Jerry, if I could interject, so this is something that we run into pretty much at most companies, where they have too much of the wrong items and too little of the right items, right? That's what we call it, the bimodal. And
Right.
You've seen this in your many years of experience working at Westinghouse and many other companies. You see this as a very common problem that as a supply chain professional, you're paid to resolve, right? That's your fundamental goal, is to make sure you have the right mix of inventory.
Absolutely. And so the point I wanted to make is that I'm going to be talking about certifications. One in particular is certification in production and inventory management. So right there, the whole IM part of CPIM focuses on this very slide and all that it connotates. There's a lot of information that, and we could separate this information into kind of the traditional stuff that you probably need to know about inventory. And then APICS does try very hard to keep very current. And as today's technology rapidly changes, we can have a mixture of traditional inventory issues and new technology solutions to help manage them better. So the only point I wanted to talk about relative to this slide is it ties exactly into what CPIM is all about. So let's do the next slide.
And Jerry, before we go to the next slide, so this is one of our core mission as Murano Corporation, as supply chain manager, is to help optimize this and manage this inventory, right? So that's our mission in life as well.
Absolutely. And it's really the mission in APEX is to effectively manage inventory. So if you're not familiar with the organization, we'll talk to a few bullets. It's a member-based professional organization that is focused on education. It is worldwide. When I was more active on the board, I served on the APEX board of directors in 2011 through 2014, and the membership at that time was in the mid 30,000, 35,000 or so. That was predominantly a North America membership, but the membership model is only in North America, and they have what they call affiliates in the rest of the world. So it is a worldwide organization, and people around the world are busy taking the certification tests that we're going to talk about. Now, in 2014, a significant event happened that APEX merged with what was then the Supply Chain Council. That brought a product called SCORE, S-C-O-R, which stands for the Supply Chain Operations Reference Model. This is a hands-on practical model on how companies can implement supply chain activities in their operations. APEX also sponsors a lot of conferences and webinars, two that are coming up as an example. They have the Best of the Best SOP conference, that's in June of this year, June 14th and 15th in Chicago. And then they have their annual international conference, and that's going to be also in Chicago in September 30th through October 2nd. A great way to get good ideas and activities of what's going on. Most importantly, though, it's focused on education, and there's where the sponsoring of 3 certifications come to play. And once certified, you do have some certification maintenance to fulfill, and then obviously you can get lots of information about the organization at their website, apex.org. Next slide then. So this is a familiar slide in the previous webinars as well. It talks about the different levels of organizational and technology maturity that your company might be at. And the point I wanted to make about this slide and its reconciliation to APEX education is that the education provides you the ability to be at level 5. It really helps you understand how to analyze your data, how to improve your processes, and how to measure those results. Next slide. So I mentioned 3 certifications, although you see 4 circles. The first certification, which is kind of the granddaddy of APEX, has been around since 1957, so it's passed the test of time for sure. It's called Certified in Production and Inventory Management, CPIM. This is a 2 examination certification now. That's effective in 2018. So up till now, it had been a 5 examination certification, but they've reduced it to CPIM Part 1 and CPIM Part 2. So that means 2 different examinations have to be taken and passed to get the certification CPIM. I strongly recommend, I've been teaching the APEX Body of Knowledge for the better part of 20 plus years, and I strongly recommend that if you're looking for credentials, you start with CPIM. The reason I say that is, number 1, it's the strongest credential that really supports the bowels of a working system relative to managing inventory. Number 2, it also provides the basis or platform of understanding that spins off into the other two, CSCP, Certified Supply Chain Professional, and CLTD, Certified in Logistics, Transportation, and Distribution. So I'm a master instructor of APEX. I've been, like I say, teaching it for over 20 years. I have just recently passed the CLTD test myself because that just came out a year ago. CSCP came out like in 2006. CSCP is a much broader certification than CPIM and really helps understanding the end-to-end supply chain and the integration that Sri has focused on in his previous webinars as well. Let's go to the next slide then. So my company offers prep courses for any and all of these examinations. They can be online, 100% asynchronous with no instructor. They can be online, 100% synchronous, totally instructor-led, or some blended combination of those two. They can certainly be on site at your companies with 100% instructor-led, and we can offer a blended activity there as well. Blended means you're doing a little bit of both, and I want to talk about a concept that I really enjoy as an instructor. It's kind of recent. Picked this up at Indiana University when I was visiting some professor friends up there, and that's called the flipped classroom concept. So I find that adults, when it comes to learning, hopefully they have the time to do some learning. That can be an issue, but when it comes to learning, adults learn better by doing than necessarily reading and listening. Unfortunately, a lot of the APEX prepared courseware is kind of requiring you to listen to the lectures. So the flipped classroom concept is something I've started doing now the last 4 years, and it basically works this way. I have many recordings of lectures that have, along with video slides, that explains these concepts, and we would flip the classroom by having you listen to those at your convenience 24/7 by just going to the website and listening to them. I've tried to keep them to no more than an hour. And then when we get together in a classroom environment, whether physically or online, we then go over the homework side. So what we're flipping is, instead of coming to class, listening to a lecture, and then going back and doing maybe some homework, we're just flipping that. You're doing the lecture on your own time, and then you come to class and you do something with that. Now, one of the popular things I do is I have a software I use that allows you to take a test from anywhere and answer your questions on your smartphone, and we gather that those answers and helps affirm whether or not the knowledge you've been studying has been kind of held in retention in your head. There is a self-study approach to any and all of these. APEX sells what is called a learning system for each of the certifications. That's a lot of reading, quite frankly, and has definitely an approach for some people to take. It's probably your least expensive, but nonetheless, that's no instructor involvement there. Just wanted to mention it. Next slide, please. So this is just one example of the content that we end up talking about in many of our CPIM related courses. Actually, I can honestly say that this slide would be in every one of the certification programs. Because sales and operations planning is just the most important level of planning a company can do. That's my opinion. So just a quick step through what we would talk about in this slide is that we identify the fact that the business planning process that is aimed at really understanding what your direction of a company is relative to things like revenue and profit and return on investment and market share goals, etc., drives the sales and operations planning. Now, the most important word, again, my thoughts relative to the process of S&OP is agreement. It's getting the collaboration of all these departments that are involved with managing the business, manufacturing, sales and marketing, finance, etc., and all the others that are listed. There's no, all players are extremely important to be on the same page. So sales and operation planning is a process that lays out the tactical plan that's going to allow a company to obtain its goals around profit. Now, in a few minutes, we're going to show how this can get expanded. I just want to finish off that in this case, the slide is showing the fact that there is a worksheet approach in S&OP planning, and that's where data is invaluable. And that's been the main message being presented to you in these webinars about the fact that Supply Chain Manager can capture that data for your sales and operations planning process. This is important because it drives then the next step of getting it built, and that's master scheduling. So this is just an example. There's a lot of these concepts that we really drill in very deep on how they work and what you need to know about them to make them effective in the CPIM, and as I said, the other two certifications as well. Next slide then.
So Jerry, before I go to the next slide, so the important point is for you to navigate through this S&OP, sales and operations planning, in a software such as Supply Chain Manager, you need to have the understanding of what S&OP is at its heart. And that's where this APIX processes, training, and certification will be, education part will be extremely valuable.
Absolutely, absolutely. And as you saw earlier, S&OP is a big subject matter. They have an annual conference on that. This is the 10th year in a row, I believe it is. And at the last 5 annual conferences, the S&OP track is the best attended. It is the subject matter most companies are interested in over the last 5 or so years. Now, you've seen this slide before. It's what we've been talking about called IBP, Integrated Business Planning. That's an extension of what S&OP started off to be. The valuable aspect of what I see Supply Chain Manager is doing that maybe some of the other so-called ERP systems don't do is it takes the word collaborative and integration an extreme step further than what we typically see. Obviously, you can see some improvements that have been identified here in some of their experience, some of Sri's company's experience. And I can echo that companies that really take any form of S&OP serious and do a good job are going to witness these kinds of improvements for sure, if not higher improvements in lowering the inventory. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. Hopefully you can see the tie to this slide between people, process, and technology relative to education. The more you know about how you're doing these things, the better you'll do it. Next slide. This is a very important slide that is I want to tie how this slide and the APIX certifications become very important. Most companies operate on the left-hand side. Most companies should operate like what the right-hand side displays, and that's demonstrating an integration of information or data between your internal data, your customer's data, and your supplier's data. This is more the ideal position we want companies to start to get into. This expands the whole word integration and allows sales and operations planning now to be even more collaborative, not only for your business, but that business that affects your customers and suppliers. So the certification CSCP is all about understanding how to work with other firms and develop a supply chain management approach to things like sales and operations planning. Next slide. So hopefully what you're, go ahead and do the next slide there. Thank you. So hopefully what you're starting to comprehend here is that the APICS education fits what Marano's company is doing here relative to their product exactly. It's almost, and I'm wondering, Sri may comment on this. I think he went out and did a whole lot of APICS CPIM research before he built his product, because when I look at this slide, these are obviously all the things he sees as important to make a really good system. Well, we see these same things in our education. Next slide. In the next few slides, we can go through kind of rapidly. Just a reminder of level 5 is where you want to be. Level 5 needs the education to get there. Next slide. Now, the next 3 slides or so, I just want to make a couple quick comments about them. Everything you see on this slide about their demand planner piece is part of the CPIM curriculum. We talk about all this stuff, so we can make your system come alive with the why you should be doing what you're doing with this information. Next slide. Inside this window here is all the variables, or many of the variables, I wouldn't call them all of them, that are involved with Demand Planner. And every one of these is part of the curriculum in the CPIM and a little bit in the CSCP. Now, this is my favorite slide of all of his slides. When you look at this middle part that has the worksheet, the grid, that's straight out of CPIM MRP, Material Requirements Planning logic. In our CPIM courses, we step through how this grid works forwards, backwards, and upside down so that you're extremely familiar with its characteristics. And then the next slide. So there's capacity is a major subject matter that we talk about. Measuring, utilization and scheduling, another major subject matter. All of these things that you're listed here are clear activities that consume the APICS, especially the CPIM curriculum. So that's kind of my prepared remarks. We can certainly take some questions right now. I think we have a few minutes.
Jerry, I'll go back to this slide.
Go back
so
to this
people
slide,
can
okay.
see it. Yeah. So if there are any questions, so any questions from the attendees? So Jerry, while we're waiting for questions, the one thing that I wanted to highlight was the traditional ERP products that have been in the marketplace for many years, and we kind of touched on that. They were not designed to handle the information requirements of a supply chain partners along with within the 4 walls of enterprise. So they were designed for within the 4 walls of an enterprise, but the future where we are competing against the Amazons of the world, they are able to successfully collect data from the supply chain partners and include that with internal data and present it in an intelligent format and be able to predict things. And that's where the future is headed. And that's the big difference. And that's what I wanted to highlight that and stress that. And some of the foundations of that, for APICS, stresses talks about SNOP, IBP, all that is facilitated and that can be made possible because of that integration between your supply chain partners' data information and your information.
Well, you're out there pioneering a concept that few companies are doing. And I see it as you're just leading the pack, because the best way to do better planning is to have better data. What better data can you get if you can get your customers' information and be able to pass that on to your suppliers as well? So absolutely. I mean, your model is a perfect fit for what theoretically is taught in the CSCP content. So I usually see a question about, well, about tests, and I don't hear any questions about exams or tests, but I'll throw some thoughts out. APEX has made testing a lot simpler than it used to be in the old days. You can test just about any day of the week. You go to a test site that's managed by Pearson VUE company anywhere in your location area. This is worldwide. All the tests are basically the same, although you won't get your neighbor's test. There's a lot of test questions they can divvy up to all the test takers. But the valuable aspect of testing is once you get the certification obtained, this is a credential that builds your resume. Now, do you need to go take tests? Not necessarily. It's just a matter of, do you want the credential? You've done the hard work of studying and understanding the concepts, so why not just go and take the test? The test cost will vary depending on which test you're taking, but they are now in the neighborhood of anywhere from like $400 to probably $650. But again, they vary depending on certification. Again, looking for any other questions.
Hi, this is Bill Stankiewicz from Savannah Supply Chain. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes, Bill.
Fantastic. Sri and your person that gave the presentation did a wonderful job, and I just wanted to say on behalf of Apex, also here out of Savannah, I serve on their board. We got about 95 members, and if you guys need any additional support out of my office here, we're here to help you folks in any way. This is Bill Stankiewicz, and thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Bill.
Bill, my fellow speaker is Jerry Kilty. He's based out of Apex, Tampa, and he's also very active in the Apex chapter in Tampa. So Jerry, say hello to Bill.
Yeah, hi, Bill.
Hey, Jerry, how are you today?
I'm good. Good. Yourself?
Fantastic. Savannah's
Super.
just booming with business, and you know we had a good with Shree's team just last week. So
okay.
And anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Are there any other questions or comments before we bring this call to an end? I'm looking at the clock here. Any other questions or comments? Okay, going once, going twice. Otherwise, I'll bring this webinar to an end. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Thank you, Jerry. Thank you, Bill. Have a great afternoon, everybody.
Thank you, folks. Safe. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.